Adi Lila, chapter 1, text number 13. Let's begin by offering obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tenamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Mani Pacharane Nirvishesha Srimati Bhaskatyades. This is a verse that's been repeated in different places in the Caitanya Charitamrita, because when verses are repeated often in any of our scriptures, it's because they're important. And although this verse doesn't have a purport, but Prabhupada has given his purport in many different lectures and in other places. So this is Advaitam Harinad Vaitad Acharyam Bhakti Samshayatnat Bhaktavarataram Ishamtam Advaitacharyam Aishwarye. Translation: because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. He is the Lord and the incarnation of the Lord's devotee. Therefore, I take shelter of him. So let me read that again. Because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. He is the Lord and the incarnation of the Lord's devotee. Therefore, I take shelter of him. In a morning walk, as I mentioned many times, Adi Swami and Satsrup Maharaj had raised a question to Srila Prabhupada about how some devotees are wondering if the Acharya is perfect, how does it seem that he makes mistakes sometimes? He may misquote verses, he may fall asleep at inappropriate times. So how do we see the perfection of an Acharya? So Prabhupada explained that because of our materialistic point of view, we don't understand what actual perfection is. That the Acharya is not omniscient like Krishna, but his perfection is, in this verse it says, Bhakti Sham Sanat, is how he's propagating Krishna consciousness. The aim of life is to become aware of Krishna. As Prabhupada writes in the purport to the verse, Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru Mame Vaishyasi Satyam Te Pratijani Priyosime. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your homage to me. The result is that you'll come to me without fail. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that one should organize one's life in such a way that throughout the 24 hours a day, one cannot help but think about Krishna. And the Lord's promise is to such a devotee that he's sure to go back to Krishna. Therefore, the Acharya is one who comes and follows the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and tries to explain to people at all levels how they can make progress towards the ultimate goal of life, namely to become conscious of Krishna. An actual Acharya has gone through all the different stages of devotional attainment. The stages of devotional attainment are, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yesham antikatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohenera muktva bhajante mam drita vrataha. Those who practice the principles of religiosity in previous lives and in this lifetime, who have acted piously, who have conquered sinful reactions, can rise up to the platform of accepting devotional service. Then they can obtain pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the perfection is to meditate in trance upon him. So that's the acharya. An actual acharya is one who's actually in love with Krishna, and wherever he looks, he sees only Krishna. That doesn't mean he sees everyone is holding a flute with a peacock feather in his hair. It means that he sees everyone and everything in their relationship to Krishna. And therefore, as he loves Krishna, he loves everyone. Such an acharya can effectively spread Krishna consciousness because people who accept things given out of love, they won't accept things so readily when things are given out of someone else's selfish ambitions. They may do that, but that is not in the devotional service of Krishna consciousness. In other words, in the material world, a place where everyone is engaged in business, either for exchanging knowledge on how to get ahead in the material world, which is called dharma. That dharma is more or less, real dharma is absent in current society. And the only thing left in society is economic development for sense gratification. So the so-called knowledge that's being given in modern society is simply how to better or improve our eating, sleeping, mating, defending, so-called improve. But because they've rejected real dharma for the most part, not that everyone has rejected completely dharma, often they accept the dharma which is concerned with how to eat, sleep, mate, and defend better, such as Ayurveda or astrology or Vastu. That's better than rejecting Veda, but that's not the goal of life. And therefore, those who know what the goal of life is, they should be careful that they don't confuse how to improve our material circumstances with obtaining the goal of life. It is not that, as it said, we should accept religiosity, cleanliness, mercy, tolerance, truthfulness, and therefore we should give up the tendency towards illicit sex, speed eating, gambling, and intoxication. We should act piously. And indeed, for a person who's sinful, who's engaged in all kinds of materialistic sinful activities, by chanting Hare Krishna, then one actually gets relief from the sufferings caused by our incessant desire for sense gratification. As it says in the Krishna book, in the chapter beginning with the personified Vedas, Parikshit Maharaj was praising his spiritual master, that you've kindly given me this knowledge, which can relieve the piercing, burning sensation that's going through my heart due to my incessant desires for sense gratification. I'm actually feeling some relief from this. So this is very important that we understand that we ourselves have to learn tolerance, but at the same time, we should help others take up the process of chanting Hare Krishna, take up the process of devotional service, if only to relieve their suffering. And hopefully after their suffering is diminished, they can appreciate that process that relieved their suffering. That we can't know whether that's going to happen or not. Prabhupada said many people come to Krishna consciousness with a hidden motive, and after getting their motives fulfilled, they go back to sense gratification again. I remember there was one devotee, Aldamani Prabhu. He was a nice Sankirtan devotee, book distributor. And one day he went to the doctor, and the doctor told him that you have an incurable heart disease and you're going to leave your body within a year. Therefore, he went to Srila Prabhupada and asked Srila Prabhupada, can you give me Babaji? So Prabhupada said, okay, if you're going to leave the body in a year, I'll give you Babaji. So Prabhupada gave him Babaji. He became a little restless because his only duty was to chant in japa. And unless one has a controlled mind, it's very difficult to constantly chant Hare Krishna, japa beats. So he went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, I can't really control my mind, keep on chanting. So Prabhupada said, all right, you can become a sannyasi. So he became a sannyasi. A year went by. He was perfectly healthy. He didn't die. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor examined him again and said, oh, I made a mistake. There's nothing wrong with you. So he said, there's nothing wrong with me. Okay. So then he left Krishna consciousness and went back with his girlfriend because there was nothing wrong with him. She might as well enjoy. So a little suffering is good if it inspires us to take shelter of Krishna consciousness. And when one can achieve a higher level after that, then of course one should try to improve oneself in one's service attitude, become more consistent in service and more enthusiastic in what we're doing. At least do it with care and attention. Now, the Acharya, he knows all about that. So he knows how to encourage people, whatever level they're at. And he does it out of love, so people can appreciate it and accept it. Even Srila Prabhupada would chastise someone, even he didn't know them, but because from his heart was emanating concern about them, like a mother, therefore they did not take it as any kind of disruption. They didn't become agitated by Prabhupada's approach towards teaching them. There was one professor who came to one of Prabhupada's lectures, and he challenged Prabhupada about Krishna. So Prabhupada started to heavily chastise him. He happened to be an Indian professor. And Prabhupada chastised him so sincerely. He said, you're a fool and a rascal. Because he was criticizing Krishna, his propriety of dealing with the gopis. He said, you're a fool and a rascal. So Prabhupada repeated it. So the man became so overwhelmed by Prabhupada's chastisement, he bowed down on the ground. He just started to repeat, I'm a fool and a rascal. I'm a fool and a rascal. And Prabhupada just got up from his Vyasasana and walked out. And the man continued to stay on the ground, repeating, I'm a fool and a rascal. Now, most of us should not try that. Because if we try that, most people will think we're a fool and rascal. That we have to be very careful in how we approach people. If we don't know how to inject Krishna consciousness within them, if we're going to cause them to have an agitated mind, what we're doing will not be productive for our own devotional service. And generally, for the most of us, we're approaching people in a daily life who are either suffering or have some idea how to perform pious activities. But in this age, of course, even we can say that generally speaking, only devotees know what real pious life is, how to perform pious activities in devotional service. So we have to encourage devotees in these things. Now, when one becomes more elevated, then we can teach devotees how, especially devotees, how to conquer sinful reactions. The Acharya knows how to perfectly do that, and we can learn from Prabhupada as our Acharya, our founder Acharya, how he dealt with the devotees to help them conquer their sinful reactions. What example he showed of tolerance. In other words, conquering sinful reactions means, basically speaking, having enough Krishna consciousness that we don't become deviated or lured by our sinful reactions. We neither become disturbed by them, wondering how, thinking ourselves to be a victim, and therefore becoming absorbed in materialistic conceptions. And we don't become elated when we attain, due to our pious activities in the past, some gain. This is also sinful reactions, because the material world means that when we forget Krishna, we're actually being subjected to sinful reactions. The material world is organized in such a way as simply to help us forget who Krishna is. Therefore, when one conquers sinful reactions, it means, basically speaking, apuryamanam achala pratishtam samudram apa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kama pravishanti sarve sashantim apnoti nakama kami. This is Bhagavad Gita 270. A person who's not disturbed. So here we have the word disturbed, not has conquered sin of reaction, is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires. So it's not that even we come to the platform of liberation from our material concept of life, it's not that material desires will cease completely, but we won't become disturbed by them. Why? Because we've attained a sufficient concentration on Krishna and pure devotional service that we're experiencing enough transcendental happiness that material nature and its allurements seem insignificant. That's one of the qualities of pure devotional service, even at the beginning stage, which advances gradually. That devotional service frees one from all sinful reactions, and at the same time gives one good qualities. And when one progresses further at a higher stage, devotional service, one derives even the conception of liberation, although it's rarely achieved. And then at the highest stage of prema, it brings one into such spiritual happiness that one is not even conscious of the fact that the material world exists anymore. One is actually situated in the spiritual world, even in this platform that we're on. Everything he sees, he only sees is Krishna's energy. Everyone he sees is only a plenary or a minute expansion of Krishna. In any case, conquering sinful reactions is a higher stage when we become aloof from the allurements of either happiness or distress. And then we can rise up to the platform of actual devotional service. At the platform of devotional service or liberation, then at that platform, one has no other business than to engage in the mission of Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna.
Maharaj, please, Doya Kore, por favor, please remember that you've been translated to Russian. Please.
Yes,
Slow down a little bit. Thank you.
Nichivo Strashnava. So, this consciousness of how to deal with persons who are on a liberated platform is not very common. To encourage people who have conquered sinful reactions and, basically speaking, are in the so-called happiness of Brahman, to be able to convince them to progress further. Like Shukadeva Goswami, he was, even before his birth, he was a liberated soul. Still, Vyasadeva was able to infuse within him the happiness of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And therefore he went from simply a liberated soul to a Paramahamsa by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, even beyond that, of accepting devotional service, there's the platform of pure knowledge of the personality of Godhead. This is at the stage of ruchi, at the stage of asakti, and even in the stage of bhava, the preliminary stages of bhava, when one's feelings towards Krishna are actually arisen in one of the five rasas. Only a very rare soul can even understand who's on those platforms. And what to speak of giving them information, how to come to the highest platform of prema bhakti, where one meditates in trance upon the personality of Godhead, purely out of love and affection. Therefore, acharyas are very rare. And in our particular case, the founder acharya of ISKCON is one. His every word, his every activity, his every instruction, indeed his every glance should be understood as perfectly engaged in Krishna's service. Therefore, if one wants to participate in the movement, one may have some doubts sometimes about Prabhupada's activities or what Prabhupada said, but we should understand what's the difference between legitimate doubt and criticism. We've come to the Hare Krishna movement, as I mentioned before, as we're under the influence of the illusory energy, doubt is inevitable. It's not possible to be under the influence of the illusory energy and not have doubt about who Krishna is, what it's like to be Krishna conscious, etc. Because if we're under the illusory energy, we don't have that experience. And if we don't have that experience, then there must be some doubt when it's given to us. But we should understand, and when we're in doubt, we should understand our position under the illusory energy, and it should not discourage us from going forward in Krishna consciousness. When we understand that we're under the illusory energy, it invokes a kind of humility within us. Humility is a preliminary mood that has to be adopted to make any progress in devotional service. As soon as we lose that mood of humility, as soon as we think we know something when we don't, as soon as we assume that we're in knowledge when we're still in the material concept of life, still to one degree or another, misidentifying ourselves with this body or mind, that should make us humble. And we should understand that along with that comes doubt. And that doubt can be cleared up by properly engaging ourselves in a process by which we develop our intelligence and our experience in Krishna consciousness, Buddha Yoga. And the only way of doing that is to understand that, as Prabhupada said, one lady approached him and asked him to recommend an edition of the Bhagavad Gita in English. And Prabhupada said, unfortunately, even if there are 600 or 700 different translations of the Bhagavad Gita in English, he could not recommend any of them because they didn't touch on the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita. And then Prabhupada explains what the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita is. He said, if you want to take a medicine, you have to take it according to the direction of the expert physician or according to the label on the bottle. Taking medicine whimsically will not be effective. Similarly, if we're going to read Bhagavad Gita, and no one's forcing us to read Bhagavad Gita, no one's forcing us to engage in devotional service. No one's forcing us to be on the path of devotion, of pure Krishna consciousness. But if for some reason or another that's our goal, then we have to read Bhagavad Gita with that spirit. And that spirit is that Krishna on every page, he explains that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, others have also supported that view, whether it be Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Sankaracharya. They've also affirmed that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And those who agree, they're, for the most part, they're part of a disciple succession, giving that knowledge of Krishna consciousness in a line of teachers. They're called our acharyas. And their aim is to revive within all of us our relation with Krishna, that everyone has an eternal relation with Krishna. And that the actual goal of life is to revive that relation with Krishna. Unfortunately, people don't know that. Ite vidu swartakatim hi Vishnu. Durashaya bahir artamanina. And because they don't know that, they're attracted to very insignificant things. But andaya tandera upagiya manas tepisha tantra urudami bhara. Although they're blind, still they're following some other blind person, thinking that they're a leader. Everyone needs a leader. Everyone has accepted leaders. There's no question of anyone not having a leader. When Srila Prabhupada was speaking to Professor Kataski at the University of Moscow, Professor Kataski could not accept the most basic teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. He could not accept that he was eternal spiritual being. He could not accept even the Varnashram system. So finally, Prabhupada, in order to find common ground with Professor Kataski, said that actually your philosophy and our philosophy are really not different. Your philosophy is, I'm going to follow Lenin. And our philosophy is, we're going to follow Krishna. So that everyone's philosophy is, I'm going to choose a leader and I'm going to follow that leader. And if you follow Lenin, then you'll go wherever Lenin is. And if you follow Krishna, you'll go where Krishna is. That's our choice. So everyone needs a leader, and we are following leaders. Unfortunately, we've had so many authorities within our lives. Some of them we're accepting and following them, and some of them we're spending our lives fighting against them, mentally at least. Therefore, one has to find a leader, Naishamatis Tavadu Rupramangrim, which will actually bring us back to reality of Krishna consciousness. So that leader, that acharya, he's situated on the platform of not only aware of pure knowledge of Krishna consciousness, not only feeling Krishna's presence at the stages of ruchi, asakti, bhava, but he's meditating in trance always upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So such an acharya is called bhakti samshanat. He knows that every living entity, the only thing they're really missing is Krishna. And somehow or another, he's trying to give them Krishna consciousness. This is Caitanya Mahaprabhu's order, but we have to learn from the acharya how to fulfill it. Yari deka tarikaha Krishna upadesh amara agai guruhana taridesh. Whoever we meet, we have the duty to try to help them become Krishna conscious. How to do that, we have to see the example of an acharya such as Srila Prabhupada. Now, some or all of us will have some doubts about how Srila Prabhupada is an Acharya. Just like under the influence of the illusory energy, we're going to have doubts whether Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead or not. Although all of us have an eternal relation with Krishna, still there's going to be doubts about it. Krishna says his illusory energy is more powerful, is as powerful as he is in this material world. So who are we compared to the illusory energy? Still, Prabhupada explains that at least theoretically, we have to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We shouldn't blindly accept it, nor should we blindly reject it. But unless we have that submissive spirit that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore try to follow his instructions to experience what he's offering us as the source of real happiness, real consciousness,
Очень
eternal.
уютно.
What's
Там
it?
ветер, тут, может, такого ветра нету.
Agnihotra. Okay, thank you. Bliss, knowledge, eternal. Unless we're prepared to have that spirit, at least theoretically accepting Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our reading the Bhagavad Gita or other books will not be effective. But Prabhupada writes that theoretical accepting of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in that submissive spirit, we can make progress in Krishna consciousness. Similarly, if one joins the ISKCON, then at least theoretically, we have to accept Prabhupada as the Bhakti Samshana, perfectly giving Krishna consciousness to others. And that submissive spirit, we can, if doubts arise what Prabhupada's saying or what he's doing, we have to seek out shelter of those who not only have faith in Prabhupada, but also the knowledge or the experience, so they can explain to us in a practical way what Prabhupada said, what he meant, what he was doing, why he did it. But if we associate with devotees even, who have themselves doubts about Krishna's, Srila Prabhupada's perfection, who don't even theoretically accept that Prabhupada was a direct representative of Krishna, Sakshat Hari, with some idea that sometimes Prabhupada was perfect, especially when he said things that were socially acceptable or politically correct. And at other times, he wasn't really part of the Vedic culture, or maybe he was part of the Vedic culture, but was part of an old-fashioned Vedic culture, and therefore he did not understand modern reality. As if there's modern reality is outside of the eternal realm of Krishna consciousness. So instead of criticizing the Acharya, which one could do, but one will find oneself outside the realm of the Acharya system and the connection with Krishna and Krishna consciousness. One may be exalted in learning. One may be exalted in other qualities too. But if one is not connected with the Acharya and disciple succession, with the Bhakti Samshana, understanding how the Acharya is spreading Krishna consciousness, then whatever one's learning is, or material opulence will be, it'll simply be a waste of time. It will not lead to the goal of life. Mogaisha moga karmano, moga jnana vichetasaha, rakshasim asarim chaiva, prakritim mohanim shitaha. Those who are doubting Krishna and doubting his representative, the Acharya, for them, there won't be happiness, no liberation, no the supreme destination. Mogaisha moga karmano, moga jnana vicheta. Their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and the culture of knowledge will all be defeated. Not that they won't be in the human society exalted and appreciated by other materialists, but if the devotees don't understand what good association is, and it's not that someone sometimes has some doubts or is preaching wrongly or It's not that they're not practicing devotional service, but one should not associate with them very intimately in that conception of life. In other words, one can understand that anyone who doubts the Acharya, then there's no sense of claiming one's following the Acharya. We may doubt ordinary people. We're free to do that. And we're also free to doubt the Acharya. But if we doubt the Acharya, we won't find any standing on the spiritual platform. We may accept another Acharya, another leader, but if they don't correct our misunderstanding, if they don't assist us in developing faith through the actual Acharya, then they will not be very helpful either in our spiritual advancement. They may help us to some degree, but because they themselves have not understood what the Acharya is, they'll be to a very limited degree. In any case, on faith, at least, those who participate in this movement have to accept Prabhupada as the founder Acharya, as the Acharya, and under his guidance, practice devotional service. And then there's a possibility of experiencing either freedom from distress or accepting devotional service, the process of devotional service, or conquering our minds and remaining fixed in Krishna consciousness, both in happiness and distress, or actually accepting real devotional service without any motivation, without any interruption, or coming to the platform of gaining pure knowledge of Krishna, being able to feel Krishna in every step of our lives, and reaching the perfection of life, namely to fall completely in love with Krishna and therefore become mad after him and therefore meditate and trance upon him. Therefore, we find ourselves in a position where advanced devotees, so-called advanced devotees, are not enthusing us, not explaining to us, not just encouraging us, but also explaining to us Prabhupada's Srila Prabhupada's exalted position and how appropriately we should take shelter of his instructions so we can serve the other devotees in loving exchanges. How we can find out who is superior to us, take their guidance and example, how we can cooperate with those who are on the same level as us, and how we can help the innocent people rise up to a higher platform of consciousness. It is the expert Acharya who can teach us all these things because he has a complete experience. Therefore, Krishna says, Acharyamam vijaniyam navamanyata karichit namartya suya bhujeta sarvadeva mayo guru. That one should not offend the Acharya. Acharyamam vijaniyam. One should know the Acharya to be my very self. He is Krishna. The Acharya is not only the soul and the super soul within the heart but he's also, Krishna is directing every movement, every word, every expression of the Acharya. It is not an ordinary thing. Acharya mam vijan navamanyata karja. At no time disrespect the Acharya. Nirmartya budya suyeta. One should not think that the Acharya is an ordinary person who's subject to death. Therefore, we worship in our temples Srila Prabhupada's Murti, because Prabhupada is actually present in his Murti. We don't worship ordinary statues. We worship Prabhupada's Murti. We worship his picture, because he's actually present in his picture. He's present in his instructions. He's also present in the hearts of the devotees who are following him. His instructions and example. Sarva Deva Mayo Guru. He's fulfilling the goal the purpose of all the demigods. He has all the good qualities, which will enable us to advance in devotional service. Therefore, in our society, although we take shelter of many devotees, our initiating guru, we take shelter of our Shiksha gurus, but ultimately in the background, there has to be Srila Prabhupada. Both our initiating gurus, our Shiksha gurus, and ourselves, we always have to be representing Srila Prabhupada and realize we have no authority independent of him. And that way, the society can be unified under the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, under the example of Srila Prabhupada, under the presence of Srila Prabhupada. Otherwise, Bhogaishvaya prasaktanam tyaya putrita chetasam vyavasayatmaka buddhi samadona vidiyate. If we don't do that, then there won't be any vyavasayatmaka buddhi, one-pointed intelligence. Instead, everyone's going to have their different opinions. Now, there's individuality of realization. There's individuality of expression. But the guiding principle is that we have to refer to Prabhupada's books, Prabhupada's example, in order to resolve what we may conceive as conflicts or disagreements, so that the unity and diversity can be there. If Prabhupada is actually in the center, not only sentimentally by chanting his name sometime, but by actually trying to understand his instructions as he's given us, then there's some possibility of unity and diversity. And then there's some possibility of this society, ISKCON, becoming one-pointed and actually becoming effective. But if we entertain doubts about the Acharya, we don't clear them up, we don't try to understand where these doubts are coming from and what is the value of them, if we don't have clear understanding of what Prabhupada was doing and how he was doing it, how he was bhakti samshadnat, how he was distributing Krishna consciousness, then we ourselves won't be able to follow his example and instructions very nicely. And therefore we'll be limited. Just like one time, as I gave this example many times, Srila Prabhupada was sitting there in his room, and some ladies came from a society where they believed that the person who didn't say anything was on the highest platform of consciousness. Harisari Prabhu, I believe, let them enter into Prabhupada's darshan, into his room, and they sat there with Srila Prabhupada for 20 minutes. And Prabhupada didn't say a word to them. And they left Prabhupada's room, they came out and they told Harisari, that was the most advanced spiritual master we've ever met. Because Prabhupada knew exactly, because Krishna is omniscient. Prabhupada, as a soul, may not have been omniscient, but Krishna is omniscient. So Krishna gave Prabhupada exactly the intelligence necessary to give them Krishna consciousness. And this example, that's why we appreciate the example of the devotees telling about their pastimes with Prabhupada, their activities with Prabhupada, because these are pastimes, these are activities of perfection, and we can learn from them. And by that learning, we can understand what our position is and how to help others come to a higher level of consciousness too, at least those who we can assist. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions?
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Yes.
This is, so in Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada talks about in chapter 6 that Rupa Goswami wants to explain about principles of devotional service, and you know, the important ideas, not
Principle.
details.
Principle.
Yep.
Principles.
So,
Principles and
yeah,
detail.
yeah. So is that an acceptable basis for the Krishna West sort of idea?
Well, depends what you mean by details. In other words, if the Acharya has given us instructions in any field, it's not exactly a detail, because one of the principles is we should follow the instructions of the Acharya. Now, how to apply that may take some intelligence and discussion. But just by saying that it's not written in the Nectar of Devotion, it is in the Nectar of Devotion. Prabhupada gave us the instructions. It may not be the most important, because Prabhupada also said, for instance, under certain he said, wearing devotional clothes or non-devotional clothes for most people is not that significant. You can chant Hare Krishna in any circumstance, whether you have devotional clothes or non-devotional clothes. But on the other hand, if one wants to most effectively preach Krishna consciousness, and one is a more advanced follower of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada, then one should take the opportunity to dress appropriately. If we're claiming to be devotees or aspiring devotees, then we should dress like a devotee, as Prabhupada explained it. Because Prabhupada had his reasons. First of all, some of the reasons he gave is that just like a policeman on the street is recognized as a policeman because of his uniform, therefore people will take shelter of the policeman. If everyone was a plainclothesman policeman, people would not even know the police were there to take shelter of them. And the other thing is good for our consciousness. You can't, if one is wearing a dhoti or a tilak or a sari, then it's very unlikely you're going to go around flirting with the women or the men. If you're dressed as a monk, it's very unlikely you're going to go outside that realm of etiquette. So it has an advantage for our own consciousness to remind us that we're actually devotees of Krishna. And it has an advantage for others that they can recognize us. So there are advantages. But to fight over this particular issue is really very insignificant compared to many other issues which are much more important to discuss. Is that all right?
Yes.
The worst thing is when we reject Prabhupada's instructions and start criticizing. That's not Krishna West. That is not Krishna. That's something other than Krishna consciousness. Yes. Is that right, Gerald?
Yeah, there's a question I agree with that. Also, when you talk about dressing appropriately, I was with my company and we were in a small van, with going from training to different buildings.
It's
And then
very
I
hard
saw.
to hear you. It's very hard to hear you.
Can you hear me better now? Sorry, the canteen. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, better.
Oh, sorry. So I was in a van with all my colleagues from work here going from the training. And then I saw a Prabhu in the street. And then I opened the door of the van and I was like, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. And then he was like, Hare Krishna. But if he was wearing plain clothes, I wouldn't have known he was another Prabhu. Does that make sense?
If he wasn't wearing devotee clothes or plain clothes? He wasn't wearing devotee clothes.
Yeah. If what the person I saw in the street was wearing devotee clothes. So if I didn't see him wearing devotee clothes, I wouldn't have been able to open the door and shout, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Like this sense of recognizing each other.
That's right. That's good. Thank you. Gyanadas.
Hare Krishna.
what would be the most effective way to explain this actual position of Srila Prabhupada, or to first of all ourselves understand, but then to try to help others to understand the same thing? Because when we hear these things, then we, at least in my case, start to want to speak to everyone immediately.
Well, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, we can understand a Mahabhagavat from his ability to convert others into Vaishnavism. So there's no one in the history that I know of who has spread Krishna consciousness as effectively as Srila Prabhupada. Not simply by managerial expertise, but by pure bhakti, infusing devotees, even neophyte devotees, with some experience of pure, loving devotional service to Krishna by his association and instructions. So that's how we can understand, is by, you can know a tree by its fruits. The fact that we're here listening to the class, we wouldn't have, it probably didn't come to the Western world, we wouldn't be here giving this class right now. None of us would be here. So we don't understand how, well, if one preaches Krishna consciousness or even tries to manage a temple, one will see how difficult it is to get anyone to take up any kind of devotional service, or to follow submissively with intelligence anything. How difficult it is to expand Krishna consciousness without taking shelter of Prabhupada.
Остановчик открыто, можно попасть или нет?
Я думаю, пойдем в светлое время суток.
Ihotra. Therefore, if we actually preach Krishna consciousness, if we actually try to manage the society, then we, taking shelter of Prabhupada, we can see how much dependent we are on Prabhupada and our acharyas and Krishna in order to do anything effectively. And if we take shelter of anyone else except for them, how difficult everything becomes. Okay, anything else? So I think we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Grantaraj, Srimad, Sri Caitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai.
Jai.
Lord
Jai.
Krishna.
Hari Hari.
All. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
His Holiness Prahladananda Swami Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai. Shri Prabhupada ki Jai.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.